2021, and we are going through the book A Wander in the Spirit Land, Part 4, Through the Gates of Gold. And this is Chapter 30, Materialization of Spirits. But before I begin, I just want to please urge everyone to read and study about Spiritism. There is nothing more important than understanding who you are, what is your place on this earth. What is the earth? Is it real? Is it a school, what Spiritism says it is, where we improve ourselves? So I would urge everyone to look at the Spirits book. You can get that for free on PDF. Just type in Allan Kardec space PDF. And also, if you'd like, you go to my website, nwspiritism.com, and download this for free. And it's on the right-hand side navigation. Go to nwspiritism.com, download it on the right-hand side navigation bar, and if you want, it's also on Kindle and paperback and Audible. But it's on Kindle. It's only 99 cents if that's how you like to read your books. I know a lot of people do. Okay, let's get into the book, which is pretty exciting. Let me bring it up here. We've been going through this. Franchezzo is what a person. Let me get rid of this on screen. Okay. Chapter 30, Materialization of Spirits. Another time when we were conversing, I asked Hussein for his explanation of the phenomena of the spiritualistic movements which have recently been inaugurated upon Earth, in which I am naturally deeply interested, particularly as it relates to materialization, and of which I wish to learn all I could. And remember, he wrote this book at the end of the 19th century, when he was there. And so the medium meetings, since Allan Kardec in the 1950s started medium meetings, people communicated, that was pretty significant. They're still around today, but it's not as popular. There's not many articles written about it. Hussein replied, in order that the mind may grasp the full significance of the atomic theory, which has been advanced by men on Earth, and which affords one of the most simple as well as logical explanations of the passage of matter through matter, it may not be out of place to say, for the benefit of those who have not given much thought to the subject, and like these questions put before them in the simplest form, that the subdivisions of matter are, as we have said, so minute that even the speck of dust which floats invisible to the eye, unless a sunbeam be let upon it to illuminate it, is composed of an infinite number of smaller particles, which are attracted and held together by the same laws that govern the attraction and repulsion of larger bodies. The knowledge of these laws give to spirits the power of adapting these atoms to their own use, while making the manifestations called materializations, now familiar to students of spiritualism. These atoms suitable for their purpose are collected by spirits wishing to materialize from the atmosphere, which is full of them, and also from the emanations proceeding from the men and women who form the spirit circles. These atoms are shaped by the spirit's will into the form of their earthly bodies, and held in combination by a chemical substance found in a greater or less degree in the bodies of all living things. Were the chemists of earth life sufficiently advanced in knowledge, they could extract this chemical from every living thing in nature and store it up to be used at will. This substance or essence is in fact the mysterious elixir of life, the secret of extracting and retaining which in tangible form has been sought by the sages of all times and countries. So he's probably referring to universal fluid, which is the building blocks of everything. And now, so when he says that yes, atoms, so the walls, as we know by our science class, walls, everything, there's plenty of space between the atoms. We just don't see it, right? We see solid, and that because that's how our eyes and everything have been constructed, and that's also how this simulator called Earth has been constructed. When there's a wall, we can't push through it because that is the way the parameters are set. As the spirits have told us, that humans on Earth can only see about 1/8 of what is around us. That's why when spirits come and actually people visited heaven, They talk about colors and things they see that they can't even explain, and that's because we don't see that range of colors or hear that range of sound in this physical manifestation that we are in for a temporary time for us to learn on Earth. And so what he's saying is that the spirits use this universal fluid and to create this temporary uh, seemingly matter to show the outlines of themselves. It's very ethereal and it's not perfectly solid, although a higher spirit, like think Jesus, when after he came to visit the apostles, after he resurrected, and they could touch him and everything, someone like that at that level can create from universal fluid. He create his body exactly the way he wants it, and it will look and appear and feel real to everybody around it. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that Spiritism says there's no such thing as a miracle. There are only things we don't understand. So Jesus coming and talking to the apostles is not a miracle, but it is something that is perfectly possible given knowledge of the spirit realm, but one which the people on the planet at the time, and mostly now, do not understand how that could be affected by Christ. But when you understand that Christ is an advanced spirit and that thought is action, and that he was in the spirit world and then he willed himself to appear, he didn't actually travel, he changed his environment by his mind and focus of will. And then what he also did is he changed his density by manipulating universal fluid around him so he could look like how he wanted to look like to the apostles. Then he appeared there. Now, remember, other spirits, I said before, say that they see Jesus, and every time they see him, he looks a little bit different. In fact, one spirit says he's never seen him with a beard in heaven, but whenever they do see him, they know right away that it is Christ. I'll carry on. Of this, however, there is but one, and that is the most ethereal element, the life giving rays. Okay, so again, that's universal fluid, as called by Spiritism. The life giving rays of the sun contain it, but who is there as yet among chemists who can separate and bottle up different portions of the sunbeams? And of all portions, this especially, which is the most delicate, the most subtle. Yet this knowledge is possessed by advanced spirits, and some day, when the world has progressed far enough in the science of chemistry, the knowledge of this process will be given to men, just as discoveries in electricity and kindred science have been given, discoveries which in an earlier age would have been styled miraculous. And of course, he says discoveries in electricity and kindred sciences have been given. So again, this person agrees with Spiritism when we say that almost all inventions and then knowledge is done by inspiration, and that people that we consider geniuses are ones that have this innate ability through their concentration and their willpower to be inspired by spirits around them and giving them this knowledge so they can act upon it. Now, it doesn't mean it's not all, they're very smart too, absolutely, and and there's a lot of things to do with themselves. But this is deliberately sent to key people so we move the earth along as far as the culture and technology. I'll carry on. Here, let me remark as to auras that constitute elements of the auras of the different sitters at the seance have quite as much effect upon the materialization as that of the medium. Sometimes the chemical elements in the aura of one sitter do not amalgamate or blend thoroughly with those of some other sitter present, and this want of harmony prevents any materialization taking place. In extreme cases, these antagonistic elements act so strongly in opposition to each other and are so repellent in their effects upon the atoms collected that they act as a spiritual explosive which scatters the atoms as dynamite shatters a solid wall. And again, this is Spiritism talks about it. Is in fact, I've been in Spiritism medium meetings, of course, on the side of the wall, not at the table. I'm not a medium. Where after the meeting, then the spirit who is the kind of the leader of the meeting will say, "No, you guys need to work together more. You need to be in more harmony." And you'll read descriptions in books by Andre Luis, psychographed by Chico Xavier, of course, that these people, they need to work together. And He could tell is when all the mediums were in harmony. The lights around the table, the auras, they all blended, and they actually it was like a dynamo, right? It created more power circling around. But when one of them is there, and let's say they're mad at the other person, or they had a bad day and they're mad at everyone, and at that point in time, their aura is darker, then it does disturb the energy and harmony. That's just as he's saying, and sometimes things just don't work. This antagonism has nothing whatever to do with the moral mental conditions of such persons. They may both be in all respects most estimable, earnest people, but they should never sit in the same circle, never be brought into magnetic contact. Since their auras could never blend, and only general disappointment can result from any attempt to harmonize them. Although apart they might each attain satisfactory enough results, they could never do so in any attempt in combination. Okay, so I believe he's a little bit wrong here that there are mental conditions that can hurt the auras, but he also has a result that some are just not on the same level. And that is why in spirit centers that they go through a couple years of training, they read the spirits book, they read other books, they go through and they get them on the same uh, moral and spiritual level, and that helps them harmonize better. In those known as simply physical mediums, that is, mediums whose assistance purely physical phenomena alone are produced, such as the moving of tables or carrying in the air of musical boxes and similar feats, this peculiar essence exists, but in a form too coarse to be suitable for materialization, which requires a certain degree of refinement in the essence. In them, it is like a coarse, raw alcoholic spirit, but in the true materializing medium, it is like the same spirit redistilled, refined, and purified. And the purer this essence, the more perfect will be the materialization. In many mediums, there is a combination of the physical and materializing powers, but in exact proportion as the coarse physical manifestations are cultivated, so will the higher and finer forms of materialization be lost. So you have to have a certain level. It is erroneous to imagine that in true materialization, you're getting merely the double of the medium transformed for the moment into the likeness of your departed friends, or that the emanations from the sitters must always affect the appearance of the resulting spirit forms. They can only do so when, from some cause, there is a deficiency of the special essence or an inability on the spirit's part to use it. In that case, the atoms retain the personality of those from whom they are taken because the spirit is unable to stamp his identity upon them. As a wax image, and until it be melted into a mold, it will retain the impress of the old. The possession of a sufficient amount of the special essence, on one hand, enables the spirit to close himself in the atoms he has collected, and to hold them long enough to melt them, as it were, into a state in which they'll take on his identity or the stamp of his individuality. The absence of the essence, on the other hand, causes him to lose his hold before the process has become perfect, and thus he has either hastily to show himself with the imperfect resemblance he has obtained, or else not show himself at all. And really, the essence is a combination of universal fluid and will and power, and the level of that spirit's spirituality and experience. Because any higher spirit can take anything and use universal fluid to mold whatever he or she wants. And so, therefore, so when he says, in that case, atoms retain the personality of those from whom they are taken, that means that that spirit doesn't have a willpower force enough to mold universal fluid around him or her, and that the willpower of other spirits or even the mediums in the room are impressing upon that spirit, and they just can't kind of block out what these other thoughts are coming from, and they can't focus enough to create their own image. Carry on. A familiar simile may explain my meaning. When in the earthly body, you took flesh, vegetable, and fluid substances readily formed, containing in a prepared state the elements your earthly body required for its renewal. And by the process of digestion, you change these substances into a part of your soul's earthly envelope. Well, in the same way, a spirit takes the ready prepared atoms given off by the medium and members of a materializing seance, and by a process as rapid as lightning artificially digests or arranges them in a material covering our envelope for himself, bearing his own identity more or less completely impressed upon it according to his power. So, again, he's trying to explain how that works. It's a pretty advanced idea. Every atom of the body of a mortal is drawn indirectly or directly from the atmosphere around him and absorbed in one form or another after it has served as clothing for his spirit. It is cast off again to be absorbed into another form by some other living thing. So, universal fluid is living, it's used, it's discarded, it's used again. It's just like what we learn in science about matter. You cannot destroy matter, it's in some form. Everyone knows that the material of the human body is continually changing, and yet many think to establish a prescriptive right to those atoms thrown off during a seance, and say that when a spirit makes use of them, adapts them to himself, therefore he must have taken their own mental characteristics along with the material atoms, and thus they try to persuade themselves that the spirit appearing clothed with these material atoms is no more than the thought emanation of their own bodies and brains, ignoring or more probably not knowing that the grossest material, not the mental atoms, were all the spirit wanted to clothe himself with and make him visible to material sight. So I think some people think that it's just a collective project of the collective group's imagination, and what he's saying is not true. That spirit is using what universal fluid around them and using it to create is not using the thoughts of the others. The best proof of this fallacy of this supposition is the conscious appearance of seances of spirits whom no one present was thinking of at the time, and in some cases, even people whose death were not known to any of the sitters. The essence or fluid, either of which I have spoken, is that which principally holds a material body together in life. At death, or more correctly, the withdrawal of the soul and the severance of the connecting link between it and material atoms of the body, it escapes into the surrounding atmosphere, permitting the particles of that body to decay. Cold retards the dispersal of this fluid ether. Heat accelerates it, thus explaining why the body of any animal or plant disintegrates or turns to decay sooner in hot than in cold climates, and thus becomes nourishment fit for those minute parasites which are stimulated and fed by a lower degree of life, magnetism, which is retained in the discarded envelope. This essence or fluidic ether is akin to the electric fluid known to scientists, but as electricity is the product of mineral and vegetable substances, it is lower in degree and coarser in quality than this human electricity, and would require the combination of other elements to make it assimilate with the human. This higher essence is an important element which have been termed the higher animal life principle, as distinguished from the soul life principle and from the astral life principle, each of which we make distinct elemental principles. And so he's talking about higher animal life is what is on the physical universe, and the soul life is what is in heaven. And the astral life, they kind of use that as a lower level of, I think the soul life is when he's talking about the intelligent principle infused with energy, which makes up a spirit. And the astral life may be your paraspirit in which you present yourself. Not quite sure. In trance, either artificially induced or occurring as part of the spiritual development of certain sensitive or mediums, this life essence remains with the body, but as life is required for its need in trance, a large portion may be taken away and used by the controlling spirit to close himself, care being taken to return it to the medium again. With some mediums, this life essence is given off so freely that unless care is taken to replace it continually, the death of the physical body will soon follow. In others, it can only be extracted with great difficulty, and in some, there is so small a quantity that it would be neither wise nor useful to take away from them at all. So, some mediums, and this is true of Chico Xavier, who have this life essence, and that a spirit can come and they can use the body of a really advanced medium and use that to create their own image. And in fact, in one medium's meeting when Chico was there, and he used to manifest things, and they had this meeting to manifest the spirit of Manuel because a friend of Chico, uh, a medium, but I think it was her father, was diagnosed with Alzheimer, and they needed a materialization of a powerful spirit to cure him of Alzheimer's. The spirit of Manuel showed up. He did cure the person, but he said, "No, this is the last time you're going to materialize anything." And why did he say that? Because Chico was so exhausted, it took him like 3 or 4 days, maybe 2 or 3 days, to recover. And again, this is exactly what he said. If we're really using these life principles from someone else, that it can take you a long time to recover. The aura of these mediums, possessing a large amount of high and pure quality, will diffuse a most lovely clear silver light, which can be seen by clairvoyance, and it helps even immaterialized spirits to make themselves visible. This silver light can be seen radiating like the rays of a star from the medium, where it is present in a very high degree. No other light is required for materialized spirits to show themselves. The spirits appearing as though surrounded by a silver halo, and with all its beautiful light illuminating their garments. They appear as much as you see pictures of saints and angels, whom no doubt the ancient seers beheld through the medium of this species of aura. Although the aid of a materializing medium and a good circle of persons still in the material body may simplify the process of building up a body in which the spirit may be able to clothe himself, yet it is quite possible for some spirits of the highest spheres to make for themselves a material body without the aid of any medium or any other person in an earth body. Hence, my example of Christ. Their knowledge of the laws of chemistry is sufficient, and their willpower is adequate to the strain imposed upon it in the process. And in the atmosphere of the earth, as well as in the plants, minerals, and animals, is to be found every substance of which the body is composed and from which life essence is extracted. So these high spirits, they know exactly what to do. And think about why we're on earth. We're on earth to learn, just to begin the step to become a high spirit. It may take another million years. I don't know how long, but we're just on that cusp. We're just training to be that. So that's why it's good to learn Spiritism while you're in an earth body, and then you'll learn more when you are in heaven. And you need to soak up the information of what is the spirit universe. How do you control the spirit universe? Because thought is action. I'll carry on. The human body is a combination of all the materials and gases found on and in the earth and its atmosphere, and only requires a knowledge of the laws governing the combination and adhesion of the various substances to enable a spirit to make a body in all respects similar to that of a terrestrial man and to clothe himself therewith, holding it in combination for a longer or shorter period at will. Such knowledge is of necessity unknown as yet except in the higher spheres, because it requires a high degree of development in the mental condition of the spirit before he can duly weigh and understand all the minute points and numerous laws of nature involved in the subject. The ancients were right in saying they could make a man. They could do so and even animate their manufacture to a certain degree with the astral lower life principle, but they cannot continue to sustain that life by reason of the extreme difficulty in collecting this lower life principle, which they had so animated that artificially made body. It would be devoid of intelligence and reason. These attributes belong exclusively to the soul, and neither man nor spirit can endow such a body with a soul, that which alone can give it intellect and immortality. At the same time, an artificially made body could serve as a covering to a spirit or soul and enable him to converse with men for a longer or short period of time, according to the power of the spirit, to retain its material envelope in the complete state. So it's just like talking to each other on a cell phone, and by looking, via one of these apps like Skype or whatever, you see the picture of each other. You're not really there, but you see the view of that person. And then when the conversation ends, that view is gone. Thus, no doubt, those of the Asians who had acquired a knowledge of these things could also renew at will the material covering of their bodies and make themselves practically live upon the earth forever, or they might disperse these material atoms and walk forth in the spirit freed from the trammels of the flesh, reconstructing the earthly body again when it suited them. Such spirit men are the Mahatmas, who, by the knowledge of these and kindred secrets, do possess many of the marvelous powers attributed to them. And I've read about them, and some of these do. They look as young or old as they wish. They can go great distances because they understand that they are light. They say everything is light, which means it's energy and thought and willpower. And they understand that they're in this universal database, and that they create themselves by the force of their mind, and that they can appear physically on Earth. There are people that can do that, but you never see them talked about much because they don't want the our culture does not want uh, to give people reason to think that we should be more spiritual than materialistic. Okay, I'll carry on. But where we differ from them is in the application of the knowledge that they have thus gained and the doctrines they deduce from it, and also to the inadvisability of imparting it freely to men in the flesh, and the duty of withholding it from them as a dangerous thing. We hold that there is no knowledge given to any spirit or mortal which may not be safely possessed by every other, provided they have the mental development to understand and apply this knowledge. Our great teacher of these subjects, the guide Arinziman, was a native of the East and has been a student of occult subjects both in his earth life and in the 2,000 and more years that have passed since he left the earth. And this is his decided opinion. He has seen both the origin and the practice of many of these ideas that are as yet new to the Western mind. While possessing the power to create a material body, and again, so this is why the spirits tell us that the whole continent of India is a great place that they hope that Spiritism really takes hold, because they're already spiritual and they already have a lot of these tenets and understanding of how the spirit world works. Okay, I'll carry on. Well, thus possess the power to create a material body from the elemental atoms alone. Spirits of advanced knowledge seldom use this power, because for ordinary materializing spirits, wait a second. Okay, just checking. Where did I go here? Okay, which are the necessary essence for saving them both time and trouble, simplifying the process. It is just as the buying a ready-made piece of cloth simplifies the making of a garment, instead of the tailor having to proceed first to grow the wool, then to spin it, and finally to weave it into cloth for himself before he can begin to make the garment. So there's probably molds already available for that. In some cases, so much of the material is taken from the medium's body as to perceptibly alter its weight. In others, nearly the whole of the material covering is used, so that the material site, the medium, has vanished. Although a clairvoyant may perceive the astral or spirit form still seated in the chair. In such cases, it is simply the gross material atoms which have been made use of, while the mental atoms have not been touched. As a rule, the spirits who take part in materializing seance, both those who materialize themselves and those who assist the chief controlling spirit, are ignorant of the means by which the results are obtained, just as many persons who avail themselves of the discoveries of chemistry and the articles manufactured by chemists are ignorant of how those substances are obtained. So, they take from an existing person, they take that gross material and use it as they wish. There is a very interesting part, and I talk about this in Spirits in the Spirit Universe, how spirits are educated. And there is a school in one of the higher levels of heaven, and they have these students, and the teacher in the room and the students are uh, are all sitting there, and there is this big bird that's in the rafters, and the teacher says, "Look, I want you to get that bird to come down and be in the circle that you're going to make in the middle of you, but you can't force it with your will, which would be very easy for them. You have to find some way to have it want to come down. So what did they do? There are all these other little birds flying around, right? So they took these other little birds, they made them all go to the floor. It was okay for them to determine that. They took the auras of those birds and they didn't use the intelligent aura, right? So the birds kept on. They took a lot of the material from these other birds and they fashioned it into creating a duplicate of the bird in the rafter. But the bird of the rafter was a male and they created a female bird. Think how this is exactly what he's talking about. Think how complex this is. They're learning to take the this is now you can look at it in software where you take subroutines and applications and you use them to use them as parts of other processes in new applications, right? So again, they're taking these auras and they're taking parts of their auras, they're taking maybe the feathers and the feet, shaping them somewhat. And then the spirit talking about says, now the hardest part of this is it needed a different throat box because the sounds it makes are different from these little birds. So they had to change the material to make it to be the same as the male bird up above, so it would sound like a real female bird. So what they did is they took the auras and they didn't delete the small birds completely. They left they left a certain percentage. So think of this though. They left a certain percentage of the birds. They used their auras to create this big bird. Then this big female bird started, you know, kind of walking around and talking, and then the male bird came down, and that solved the problem. But then what they did is they replaced the auras that was used to make the fake big bird, and they put them back into the small birds. Now, think how this would be done. You can't just there's you just can't put in a bunch of auras and just randomly give them to different birds. No, so each subroutine, however you want to call it, software or application, had to be marked, or aura had to be marked with a unique identifier as belonging to bird A through Z, let's say, and they knew that bird D had these auras that they took from them, these components, let's say, and they gave that back to bird D. And then all the little birds were completely whole again, and they flew around. So spirits have told spiritist mediums the same thing as Franchezzo is reporting in the end of the 19th century, what he found. So think about that. Entirely different views. And this is the beauty of Spiritism. And also think about, what does that mean? What does that mean about the spirit universe? It means that it's a logical component, which is so elastic, and it has so much information packed into everything, and that the way to manipulate the spirit universe must be some sort of set of routines that we get more and more of as we ascend in the spiritual universe in heaven, that we're able to do more and more to all this data and to make data into shapes so our senses can see the shapes. Think about what that means. And then think about, what you're going through on earth and why you're going through it. You're going through what you're going through so you can do things like this. That you would say, it's impossible. I can't make something out of nothing. I can't get 5 people sitting around me and then use their auras to make another. Well, yes, you could. You wouldn't want to do it with people, you do it with, lower animals, but yes, you could. Okay, we carry on. There is in all materializations an invisible head or director from a sphere greatly in advance of the earth, who may be called the chief chemist. Okay, again, this is the chief spirit director. In spiritist medium meetings, there's always this top manager, this chief who's there, and he or she controls everything around there, and passes his direction to a spirit strong in the power of controlling the forces of the astral plane, and to others under him who come in contact with the medium in direct order of the materializations of personal friends of the sitters, besides sometimes materializing and showing themselves to the circle. So, again, you see this in Spiritism, where a group of spirits will sit around and they'll create a building. But then a higher spirit will come and they'll kind of like finish it off, um, and, kind of make it stronger. So it takes a bit of a higher spirit sometimes to help these people who are not that well. So again, why is that? Because the spirits that are around the earth, there's like different levels of heaven, different ways of numbering it. But Jiva and the spirits that talk to him use 10 levels, other people use 7 levels. But from one of the highest levels, 8, 9, 10, or whatever, and it may be above that, because then this level that it's above the earth. But they'll come down and help these things. And so a the spirit who just died a couple of years ago, still in one of the lower levels of heaven, would need help with all this knowledge that they haven't gained that expertise yet, right? It's like you don't want a surgeon who just got out of school being there by him or herself operating on you. You want someone who has done hundreds of these surgeries being right beside this younger surgeon and making sure that everything works correctly. Let me carry on. There is a powerful movement now going on in the spirit world with the object of extending the knowledge of all these subjects, both among spirits and men in the flesh, whether of the east or the west, which would still shut up such knowledge within the precincts of the temple, may fight against this movement, but it will be a fight in vain. The power is too strong for them. Men are pressing into the avenues of knowledge on all sides and thronging around the doors, which sooner or later must be open to them. Again, this is what Spiritism says. Spiritism is dedicated to the point of bringing people who talk to spirits, bringing people who are spiritual out of the priestly class and giving it to everyone. This is the future of Earth. This is the planet of regeneration. Well, people can get together in their house, talk to spirits. You should have knowledge, but you need to study. Everyone should read the medium's book, read about spiritism, find someone who has experience and use that person to help you. But it's not going to just be within the power of the priestly class so they can charge you for using it. I'll carry on. You cannot suppress this knowledge. It is an inalienable birthright of every soul. Neither can it be made the property of any class. So as soon as the mind begins to think, it will search for knowledge and feed upon the crumbs as come in its way. And surely it would be better to impart the knowledge sought carefully and judiciously so it can be assimilated than to try to suppress the desire for it or leave the hungry soul to gather it for itself in the garbage heaps of error. Now, there's another great story about a priest who came to earth, and his job was really to kind of within the Catholic priest and to help the people in his parish to understand the Spirit's talk. But this priest was, as part of the Catholic Church, he knew that if he did that openly, he would be pointed at. He would not be promoted, in that he would be, the nail that pops up that needs to be hammered down. So he never did. He kind of helped people kind of indirectly. He waited till other people would do it first. And when he passed away and went to heaven, he was asked, "Why didn't you do this?" And he said, "Well, I have to, because I just couldn't. It was just too tough." And that's why a lot of people fell on their mission, because people don't want to appear different. They don't want to swim against the tide. And I'll carry on. The human race is advancing eternally, and the tutelage of the child is no longer adapted to the growing youth. He demands freedom and will break from the leading strings altogether unless their tension is relaxed, and he is suffered to wander in the pathways of knowledge to the utmost of his powers. It is not well, then, that those who are the sages of the race should respond to this thirst for light and knowledge by giving, through every channel and avenue which can be opened, the wisdom of the ages in such form as it may make the most easily comprehended. This planet is but a speck of the universal knowledge as is adapted to its state, and each hour requires that the expansion of the human mind shall be met by expansion of its creeds and its resources, by pouring in fresh streams of light, not the suppressing of the old, lest it should be too strong for the sight. And that is the end of that chapter. So I hope that helps people understand a lot and understand materialization and understands how this book, written more than 100 years ago, psychographed more than 100 years ago, is still alive, and it corresponds to the Spiritist principles, and it corresponds to things that you could find out yourself. And it shows through subtle hints that the spirit world is malleable, it's elastic, it's full of information. It is of a substance that a higher spirit, a craftsman of the highest degree, can mold and make and manipulate in whatever form they wish to do, given the limits of their power. And if you have that knowledge and you think about what a just an amazing universe heaven is, the spirit world is, you can understand why we have to be trained here on earth to become more loving, fraternal, charitable, and honest. Why we have to get rid of our primitive emotions. And that, yes, this is tough. And we all complain. Life is hard sometimes, but it's all meant to be stimuli for us to transform our character and personality to be calm and cool and loving. Doesn't mean you have to be pushovers or weak in all circumstances. And so that's what you're working for. You're working for something just so utterly fantastic that it boggles the mind. And you don't even see any fantasy or science fiction book where you can just create out of nothing. There's always limits. And this has the only limit there is your own dedication to knowledge and to transforming yourself. So I hope that helps as an interest to people. And this is why I love reading these books. And if you'd like to know more about spirits and how they learn to manipulate the universal fluid around them, and how when they go higher in heaven, they're not just given a diploma from one level to another. They're given more power, more ability, more endurance, more ability to focus, more intellectual capacity. They're given more things. And this is how a spirit like Jesus Christ is so powerful that he was one of the spirits that helped create our solar system. And actually, he molded the earth, the moon, and guided everything for billions of years. Jesus is so much more than this wonderful, amazing person that was on earth for 30 odd years. He is the leader of the earth, of us all. That's why he is our Father. And in one essence, because he helped mold what we look like. Okay, so I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. And I will, again, next Sunday, we will start on talking about the weekly magazines by Allan Kardec. There's a lot of interesting information that he writes about, and medium meetings and other things. And on Mondays, we have questions and answers about Spiritism. And on Tuesdays, I talk about this book. And I'll begin when this one's over. I'll talk about another book that was brought to us by a spirit. And I'll show that to you. Anyway,